Hello, everybody, and welcome to What's New with Resumes. My name is Ole Kaken, and I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator for LA County Library. And now I would like to introduce our speaker for today for What's New with Resumes. Liz Mohler is a long-time and talented career coach who has been presenting for the library amongst other organizations for a long time. Liz was part of numerous programs for our first incarnation of Work Ready last year, and she's back today to reprise a program that we've actually done once before. What's New with Resumes? Liz, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Oleg. I'm excited to be here. I have got lots of fun things planned, and I'm not exactly sure who's in the audience. So I just wanted to say, for those of you that are job seekers, we're here to support you. For those of you that are coaches and counselors and resume writers and people that are in the business of helping other people, we're excited that you're here because I am a huge fan of what I call pay it forward. So whatever we teach you today, I want you to teach it to your children if they're in high school, if they're in college. I want you to teach it to your coworkers if they're unhappy at their jobs. We've got lots of great advice, and I am going to break at about a halfway point, check in, see if there's some questions, and then finish up, and then really just open it up to all of you for questions. So I'd love to go ahead and let you know a little bit more about who I am. As Oleg said, I'm a career coach. So I am here to help you realize your potential, what's within you that needs to come out, help you visualize some of your goals, and then eventually actualize your dreams. So that's like a tagline and a logo I put together. And this is a walk that I do on a regular basis to the beach because I live in Los Angeles. I live in Playa del Rey. And I just love getting outside and sort of exploring what there is in the world and possibilities. A little bit more about me is that I'm originally from Madison, Wisconsin. So I graduated from the University of Wisconsin, and then I moved to Arizona. It was a little bit warmer, got my master's degree in vocational evaluation, career development, career coaching, and then moved to Los Angeles, got married, had a couple boys. One graduated from UCLA in design media arts. He's fascinating. He's doing all sorts of visual NFT art. The other one is a lacrosse player, graduated from Boston University and is living in Melbourne, Australia, teaching and coaching and helping lacrosse players. And in Los Angeles, what I get to do is I have a private practice, and I also consult at universities. I used to teach at Pepperdine's MBA program. I also was teaching as an adjunct professor there for counselors learning how to do career development. I went back and got my ICF, International Coach Federation certificate. I have an ACC, and I've just submitted the paperwork for my PCC to do private coaching at a higher level. One of the contracts I've picked up is called Chief, and it's for chief executive officers, chief information officers, chief financial officers, but it's women only, trying to break through the glass ceiling and get up to the CEO, C-suite level. So that's an organization that I really enjoy working with. I'm also doing some work with human resource professionals. So I will be in Malibu in person, in real life, doing an event for the professionals in human resources on September 17th. So if you're local and you want to hear about that, let me know. Today's event is to cover all the myths. What do we know about resumes that we've heard in the past, but is it true today in 2022? And then once we get the resume done, where do we send it? What are some resources? And of course, I'm going to have some Q&A, and I'm going to have an opportunity to talk about any mistakes you might have around resumes. We all have that COVID gap, so we want to talk about that. And then ATS, what happens when the World Wide Web gets a hold of our resume and sends it out to the bots in the world? So to get you started, let's jump right in. The resume will get you the job. That's what we were always told, right? The reality is it will help you focus. And what I mean by that is the art and science of creating a resume means that it's going to help you focus on what have I studied? What have I learned? What experiences have I gotten? And in doing the activity of putting a resume together, it's going to help you clarify your strengths. Because one of the things I say about writing a resume is I only want you to put the good stuff on the resume, the stuff that you want more of. And doing all of this as a resume writing activity should boost your confidence. that you get to actually reflect back on, wow, where have I been? What have I learned? Where am I now? But the myth of the resume that it will get you the job is not true. The reality is the objective of the resume is to get you the interview. And for many of us out there, the resume is also an afterthought because some of you use the most effective manner to get a job, which is, drum roll, the most effective way to get a job is through your network. So your network says great things about you, recommends you. The hiring manager says, okay, you're hired. And then human resources gets involved and says, okay, now submit a resume because we need the paperwork. We need to validate that you are who you say you are. And so they want that piece of paper because they want to validate it. But the object of the resume, if you're sending it out ahead of time, is the resume is to get you the interview. So taking another glance at those myths, 1 page. Do you remember being told it needed to be 1 page and it needed to be concise and clear and just all on 1 page? The reality in today's marketplace, it could be 2 or more. Don't leave a half a page. I don't want 1.5 or 2.5. But I've been coaching executives at a very high level, and their curriculum vitae, their long resume, can be 5 or 6 pages. The reality in our digital COVID world is that your resume could be a website. Somebody wants to see a sample of your work, or it could be a video resume where they're actually asking you to upload a 2 or 3 minute video explaining who you are, where you're from, where you went to school. They want it in audio format or video format. So that's kind of new with resumes in this day and age in 2022. The other reality is that we've got to make sure we know what we're writing the resume for. The myth, you should copy the same resume. The reality is no, you've got to have a one size for each individual place that you're applying. So it is not one size fits all. It's customize the resume to target the job you're looking for. And you might say, well, maybe I just want to get into retail sales. Maybe I just want to get a job during the holidays. So all I need is one resume and I'm going to take it to the local mall and I'm going to pass it out. But at the local mall, all those retail stores are a little bit different. There's a difference between a store that is selling vitamins and health products and a store that is selling shoes, or a store that is selling makeup can be a little bit different, or a Nordstrom's can be a little different than a Target. So you take a look at that resume, you take a look at where you're going to send that resume, and you tweak it, you customize it to fit the job that you're going for. So that's kind of the basics, but let's get into real basics. Some things don't change. So historically, we've had 3 different kinds of resumes, and people like to see a system that is comfortable. So the first resume type that I recommend clients use is what's called chronological. And what that means is that they want to know on a resume in order of where most recently you worked, and then where did you work previously, and then where before that. And you do it in chronological order. And the rule of thumb is about 10 years. Because even if you were a secretary or you were doing work for a medical office 10 years ago, it may be obsolete to what's going on today. So we don't really want to know what you did 25 years ago, 30 years ago. We want it to be current in a chronological resume. Now, some of us say, well, that chronology is a little messed up. So maybe what's better for you is a functional resume, which highlights your skills, highlights your qualifications, and does not put the dates on the resume at the top. It just highlights your skill set, or it highlights your latest education first. So we would highlight with things that are current at the top. Or you can be a combination where you give the highlights of your qualifications at the top and then your work history at the bottom. So you're kind of doing a little bit of both. What's new in resumes is that I was reaching out. I used LinkedIn to reach out to my circle of college counselors and career advisors and resume writers. And I said to them a couple of weeks ago, what is new with resumes? And I got a lot of great feedback. And there was people from resume writing academies, this woman named Marie. She said, skip the objective of pursuing a job in marketing or sales, because it's redundant. If you're sending the resume in, hopefully the cover letter explains the objective. The reason I'm reaching out, the reason I'm including this resume is because I'd really like to work for your company, not a generic objective of I want to work in sales. So skip that. Go right to the meat of the issue, which is about who you are, so that you put the resume together and you can get it out there into the world based on where it is you want to go. So you get together, you write the resume, lots of resources, but the curiosity is, where should you send your resume? So if you're going to send your resume out, the curiosity is, who's out there in the world that's going to want to see your resume? And so it's a little bit of a challenge to ask yourself, well, where's the audience online? Because now that it's COVID, we may not be getting out to in-person events. We may go down to an office and the doors are closed because everybody's still working remote or they're working hybrid. So in this new world with new resumes, we've got the World Wide Web to help us out. So I went ahead and Googled, where do you send resumes? And I came up with a big list. I went right to the source. I went to Google and I typed in, what are the 10 best job search websites? And according to Indeed, who did the survey, they think they're the best. So best overall was Indeed. But you'll see below that, monster.com is still around. Glassdoor, which I recommend to clients to Google to get salary ranges so they can see what's inside a building and get feedback from employers that work there. But there's also things like flex jobs for people that are remote. Maybe you're traveling and you want something flexible. Or ladders. If you're working your way up the corporate ladder and you want to make more than $100,000, you may want to go to a more high-level executive job search. If you're just starting out or you're freelancing, there's Angels List, there's the Get Work, Scouted, Snag a Job, and then one of my favorites, which is LinkedIn, which according to Indeed and this survey is just for those of you that are working with recruiters. But I think LinkedIn's great for anyone, but it's not for everyone. You've also got Craigslist, Facebook, Nextdoor. There's many people working many different kinds of jobs, and maybe some of the blue collar jobs, like the guy that trims my trees in the front yard, local plumber. I'm going to want to go to my local Nextdoor and see what my neighbors recommend, see what word of mouth has. If I'm actually looking to change industries, I may want to look at USA Jobs and see what industries are hiring and get a little bit of a government perspective of where are the most openings. Then there's things like the Muse or Handshake, which is great for college students. College students, if you've graduated, take advantage of your alumni organizations. If you're in college or about to go to college, take advantage of Handshake, which matches your university up with places around the university that may want to hire you for an internship or a residency. And then there's things like Resume Rabbit, ZipRecruiter. There was a plethora of job sites online. So as I take a little break, I want to ask, I've just thrown at you some myths and some basics, and maybe I'll ask Oleg, take a look. Is there any chats or anything that's come up? Because I don't see the chat field and I don't see the Q&A. But I'd love to take like a 2-minute break and just say, how are we doing? Should I go on ahead or take a moment?
Sure. So this is the opportunity. If you have questions in mind right now, go ahead and post them in the Q&A section. If you have comments about anything Liz has said so far, place it in the chat. We do have a few questions coming in. So one question is, I'm 55 and employed. Do you suggest I leave off graduation date of college off my resume? And then the question continues, I took the dates off my LinkedIn account and only list the last 10 years of my experience in jobs. I do feel ageism is real when being interviewed by younger people.
Oh, absolutely. I'm so glad that's a great question that came up, because it also is effective when you're a recent college grad to put your education at the top. But if it's been a few years, right out of college, you could put a GPA. After that, you take off the GPA, you take off the graduation year, and you can put it at the bottom. Because I agree, ageism, I think, is alive and well. So we really don't want to promote the fact that it's been a really long time. So absolutely, if you are comfortable taking the dates off, I even tell people, if you've got a lot of information on your resume, you might not need to put the month. You might not need to say that it was January to July. You can just put it was 2017 to 2019. It's a great question about education. And you could also add to education LinkedIn Learning or certificates you've gotten or a license, or if something's been renewed, those sorts of, it could be education / training to show that you're still learning, even though you graduated years ago.
That's a great point. There's so many learning opportunities out there, and there's one of the best ways, as you said, is to show that you are current, that you've been doing the job and know about what's going on, is to list those trainings, and then you can elaborate more on what you know during the interview. So the next question, this person thought requesting a photo or video for a job was illegal. So in that context, is it illegal? And then how do people request video resumes then?
That's a great question. And I think that this is where I tell my clients, there's no one way to write a resume, and there's no two resumes alike, just as there's no two people alike, there's no two companies alike. So it's hard to do a general session on resumes, because if you are interviewing for a job as a model or an actress, you're going to need a headshot. If you're interviewing for a job as a keynote speaker, they may want a one sheet. They may not want a resume. They might want a one sheet with a photo or a video or testimonials. So it's a really tricky world to try to figure out, well, do they want a photo or do they not? And one of my rules of thumb is to ask them. See if you can find somebody working at the place you want to apply, or see if you can find somebody who's had that job previously and ask them, what's the appropriate etiquette for applying to this position? Do they need a headshot? Do they need a bio? Do they need what else do they need? And yes, you're right. We don't want to put photographs on most resumes. Most jobs, you don't put that little picture up at the corner. That would be a little unusual. So great question.
Yeah, so for the most part, no pictures.
No.
Occasionally for certain specific jobs where usually you know that you need to include a picture,
Right.
then you do.
Yeah. And I do have some basic resume do's and don'ts, so we can kind of keep
Right.
going, or I could throw out a couple more questions.
Let's do some more questions. We've got a lot of questions coming in. Some of them are similar to what you've already answered. So I'll try to not include those. But so you talk about LinkedIn. How important is it to establish a LinkedIn profile for somebody looking for more managerial positions?
I think the higher up, when you say managerial positions, I would say LinkedIn is important. And the reason it's important is because people want to get to know who you are. And one thing that people are going to do in this new age of 2022 is they're going to Google you. So I always tell my clients, put your name in the Google bar and see what shows up. If it's Facebook, make sure it's appropriate. I tell my college students, we don't want pictures of you drinking and partying or anything that's inappropriate that's going to weed you out. So LinkedIn is a possibility for you to promote yourself. You get to choose a headshot for LinkedIn. You get to choose a banner photo for LinkedIn. You can choose your title for LinkedIn. And if you're in the executive level or managerial level, the higher up you go in your career, you're going to want that LinkedIn to show your knowledge, to show your engagement in your industry. You can connect with other people in your industry. You can connect with other managers in your industry, and it puts you out there as sort of more of an expert.
Then another LinkedIn question. Could you clarify using LinkedIn with recruiters?
Yes. So we're going to get into that a little bit when we get into the ATS, because recruiters are only working at a very high level, and they're working for their clients, which are the companies, because the companies are working very hard to hire people, but they need help. So recruiters go to LinkedIn to help them find people, and that's how they will identify you and reach out.
All right, so let's do one more question. And then I see a lot of people have asked questions about an employment gap, and I know you're covering that later in the presentation. Yeah. So let's do one more question and then move forward. So right. This is a big question though. How does one age-proof one's resume?
The best way to age-proof one's resume is to go ahead and use that functional model and really start at the top with highlighting skills and qualifications. So if you can have the audience, the resume reader immediately see that you're current, that you've got current knowledge, that you've got current experience, that you can solve their problem, then that's going to supersede anybody that's just peeking around to find somebody who may or may not be too old for the position.
All right. So we have a lot of questions and we can save those for when we have a lot of time, which is
Great.
towards the end of the presentation. And I think you're going to cover some of the things that people have asked. I've been scrolling through questions during the rest of the presentation. So
there you go. All right. So there are a few basic formatting do's and don'ts. And what's fun about this is that I was reading some of the comments from my LinkedIn and somebody gave me a really creative idea. They said, think about the person that's receiving the resume and their comfort level with it, because we want to make it easy and comfortable. So it's kind of like looking at a menu at a restaurant. When you walk into a restaurant, we're kind of conditioned to see appetizers at the top. That's the stuff that gathers our attention. That's kind of whets the appetite for having the meal, is what are we going to start with? What are the starters? We highlight those. Then we go to the main dish, which is sort of the body of the resume. And then we have supporting information. And the supporting information might be the side dishes or hobbies or interests or activities. So it's kind of like when you look at the resume, we want it to be clean, crisp, and simple. There was a guy named Tom Pounder that commented that the resume is also kind of like the body, and the heart of the resume is got to be your experience. So that's what needs to hop off the page. And then the rest are all those supporting vital organs. So there is no one way or one size fits all. And the different parts of the resume, whether you're using a template from 2003 or a template from 2022, both of them just need to be logical. They need to be simple and clear and crisp. And we're going to go into that a little bit more because there's common parts of a resume. So just to walk you through it, I like highlights, I like summaries, I like things up at the top so that the meaningful short statements are up there. The generic statements are out. 2022, they don't want to read that you're a hard worker, a team player. They don't want to read all the generic stuff at the top. They want to see what's unique to you. And you can support that with your education. And as I said, if you're a recent grad or you've got a diploma or a certificate that's new, put it at the top. Otherwise, you can put your experience at the top and then follow along with the education down at the bottom. And throughout the resume, you may want to put your skills. In some people that I work with, they want to put the skills in a highlighted fashion because they want to section the skills off. So they might want managerial skills or technical skills, and then they can be really, really specific. Most importantly, it has to be a reflection of who you are. And when I say that, I always tell my clients, take some time to really take a deep breath and go through what I call the 3 most important things to gather in your thoughts about where you're going in your career. So the first question is, what do you know? What are the things that you already know how to do? What sort of knowledge, skills, education, training, certificates? If you speak a foreign language, if you can read and write in that foreign language, if you have knowledge because you grew up in a family of construction workers and you know a little bit about building a house, or you grew up in a family that cooks and you have cooking skills, somehow putting together who you are and what your knowledge is can help you decide what you want to do going forward that might be valuable to the audience of who's looking at your resume. So what is it you know? But dig a little deeper when you're looking into getting a new job. What is it you really like? What sort of accomplishments or experiences or people or interests do you have? Because sometimes this resume is a door opener for somebody to say, hey, I'm also interested in those things that person's interested in. And I like that thought behind it, that person. I'd like to have a conversation with them. I was coaching a guy that was a lacrosse player, and he put lacrosse as a hobby, and he was called in for an interview because the manager said that's what we need, a hard-hitting, competitive team player, and lacrosse is an East Coast Ivy League sport. I want to meet this person because they put lacrosse. I had somebody else who put their volunteer work on, said that they were active in animal rescue, and somebody said, well, that's what we need. We need somebody who's caring and thoughtful. We need somebody that's interested in helping the environment or helping the world. So ask yourself, how can I put the story of who I am into my resume because people really want to get to know you and like you, but most importantly, trust you. So I may want to encourage you to dig a little deeper into some of those soft skills, some of those core values, those personal traits. Those hobbies are a great place to showcase who you are. And so in an appropriate setting on a resume, if you've got some white space to fill, throw in some hobbies, throw in some interests, especially if you've got interesting interests like climbing mountains or ballet dancing. You know, we make assumptions about people that have those interesting hobbies. So looking at what kind of job you're looking for and what might be a good connection is how you want to make things fit. This is all a great journaling activity because a lot of times my clients are stuck on, I can only do what I've done before. I'm only going to write down my skills and my past experience. And yet when I start to really ask them, well, what else do you do? Well, I volunteer at my church, or I help at my kid's school, and I really like sewing, or I have an Etsy site, or I make my own websites, or I do my own videography. All of these other ideas and thoughts are skills and knowledge and experience that you may want to weave into that resume. That being said, you have to be a little careful. ATS, applicant tracking systems. These are rules for the applicant tracking systems. Fonts, Times New Roman, Arial, Courier New. If you're going to upload it into an application, or if you're going to post it online, it may not be read by a live person. It might be read by a bot. It may be read by a computer who is coming up with looking for exactly what they're looking for to match because they're getting thousands of applications. I coached a client who applied at Amazon just to get an entry-level job at Amazon, and his application made it to the top the second time he applied, but he got rejected the first time. And we looked at what he had done on his first resume, and it just wasn't full enough with the keywords, and it had block colors, it had weird tables, it had interesting little things and graphs that he had put together that he'd learned in college and thought would be of interest. And the bots had rejected him before it even made it in. So you want to make sure you've got crisp and clear sections for these ATS systems. You've got to make sure education is bold and highlighted and ready to go, and the experience and the skills, because it's going to be taken apart and possibly even put into a numerological lineup. So one way to do that is to get your keywords in there. And I'm going to give you a whole list of action words to get you started. Maybe even take the job description and set it next to your resume draft and circle all the words in the job description and ask yourself, have I done that? Have I experienced that? Do I have skills in that? Are those key words showing up on your resume? Because the number one thing that the employer is looking for, and the number one thing that the applicant's looking for, and the thing you need in order to get hired, is you need to prove that you're a really good fit. And the best way to show on a resume that you're a good fit is to take a look at the job description and take a look at your resume and see if those words fit together. And you can list those words. You can insert them 2 or 3 times if it's an online application, and you might even use an acronym. You've managed, you've supervised, you've coordinated. You may have to spell out for different jobs. You don't want to just tell them that you've got VR experience. It might be VR on one part of the resume and virtual reality in another part of the resume. You might have a CRM familiarity. You might use Salesforce. You might want to spell that out, contact management database, or that you've got record keeping skills, and then spell out what kinds of record keeping. So you're actually filling your resume for the applicant tracking system if that's where you're going to be submitting your resume. So we want to make these easy. This is just one page of the action words that I was describing. Lots of different words for leadership, lots of different words for research, and hundreds of different words that talk about your ability to communicate. Your resume is a showpiece. It's really kind of a writing sample. And I tell my clients, make sure it looks pretty. Make sure if you're going to physically turn it into somebody, you might want to go to the print shop and print it on bonded paper so that they physically get that bonded paper and go, wow, this person feels good. This person feels strong. Making it look good is so important because you want to make it easy on the eyes for the person that's reading it. Now, to get into the guts of using these keywords is a technique that you can Google because it's pretty well known, and it's the STAR model. And I know I'm speaking a little quickly, so hopefully if you need to go back and kind of dig into this, you can Google this technique and you can find videos on it or examples of it. But basically, you're trying to make your resume come alive. You've got to, as another one of my career coaching friends, colleagues said, impact profits, impact revenue, impact the bottom line by explaining that you've been in that situation before. You've dealt with this problem before. You've faced these conflicts. That's the situation. Then you figure out, well, what was the tasks that I did? What was my responsibilities? What was my goal? What was the challenge? And then what action did I take? And if you worked on a team and you were the leader, take credit for that team. What was your responsibility, your specific goal? What was the action? And then what was the result? And how did it benefit the organization? And can it be quantified? So the STAR method is also a great tool as you're writing your resume. You're reminding yourself of what I call your success stories. And sometimes I start with that when I'm working with private clients. When I'm coaching an individual who wants to go from where they are to where they want to be, I ask them, well, what are some of your STAR success stories? When did you feel on top? And if you're stuck on coming up with success stories, ask your family, ask your significant other, ask old coworkers, old classmates. What am I good at? Where do I shine? What are some of my strengths? What was the situation and how did I deal with it? Because inevitably, it could be something that we call a non-cognitive success, where you got employee of the month or salesman of the year. But the curiosity in putting it in writing is how. What was the situation, the task, the action, and the result? And it's real important to read through the resume and see if you can add dollars, percents, and numbers. This is what makes things pop off the page. When you can actually say that you saved the company $100,000 annually by eliminating ineffective procedures or reducing overhead, you're putting that number in. Or if you increase customer satisfaction through effective onboarding and job training and periodic written assessments resulting in a 90% customer satisfaction score. Or if you were responsible for hiring and training and supervising how many people? Was it 3 people, 10 people, 100 people? If you could deliver products within 24 hours, if you could go 75 miles, any opportunity to add dollars, percents, or numbers will add to that trust factor of the credibility. It wasn't just that you were coaching lacrosse, is that you were coaching lacrosse to 75 third graders on a Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. when it was 700 or 95 degrees outside. You've got to get your story and then write that story in as a bullet point. One of the reasons I like bullet points is that you can move them around. You can ask yourself, which of these bullet points is most important for this job? Maybe they don't care about your hiring and training. Maybe they care about something else, or maybe they do care about hiring and training and you need to move that bullet point to the top. So we reorganize those bullet points so that we can actually move things around so that they read better to the audience or the person that's reading them. And in putting those bullet points together and in putting that resume together, yikes, we might have some gaps. This can be a challenge. And I put in red, COVID explanation. It's a great curiosity. What were you doing? Did you volunteer to sew masks? Did you take on the responsibility of educating your homeschooled children? Did you learn how to work on Zoom? All of you, congratulations, you've figured out Zoom. Maybe you've also figured out WebEx or Slack or Team Snap, or maybe you worked remotely and you were able to be resilient and adaptable. Maybe you had to do some caregiving. Did you take on a volunteer project? Even if you only did food bank, chopped up food for the food bank once or twice, that can be a hobby, that can be a skill. What we want to show is that you quickly adapted to the new environment. Maybe you had to upskill some of your technology. So we no longer can get away with saying on our resume that we know Microsoft Office, because everybody knows Microsoft Office. We want to know, what else do you know? And the reason this is challenging is because we've all got this gap. There's always been a little something. But in 2022, we're kind of in a world of what else? What did you do on the side? Did you have a hobby or a side hustle? Maybe you started driving for Uber or Lyft. That's a skill set. That shows some tenacity. That shows some drive, excuse the pun. The tricky thing about resumes is resumes are just a piece of the job search puzzle, but we don't want those resumes and resume mistakes to take away from you. I frequently get clients who call me up and they're at wit's end. They say, Liz, I've sent out 100 resumes and I only got 2 interviews. And I go, well, that's pretty good, because your chances of getting a job through a resume, applying online, used to be 100 to 1. You'd have to send 100 resumes to get one. In 2022, with the ATS and the systems, it's getting a little bit better. You're likely to get a better response on resumes because people are job hunting online more post-COVID. That being said, there's a few mistakes that people make. Number one, they make mistakes because they have grammar and typos, and it doesn't read well. 77% of employees will screen it. If they find 1 or 2 mistakes on the resume, they're going to think you're going to have 1 or 2 mistakes on the job. If you don't show the attention to detail and care to get somebody else to proofread your resume, if you can't do that for them, the curiosity is, how will you be when you show up to the office? What would that look like? Number 2, if it's hard to read, if there's too much text, too many big paragraphs, it overwhelms them because they can't see through it. Number 3, if it's generic and not customized. If they look at the resume and they think this is the resume they've sent to everybody, they're going to think, does this person really want this job, or are they just desperate and they're applying and they're going to ghost me? Maybe I'll interview them, I'll hire them, and then they're sending this resume out to all these other people. The 4th one, if you have a lack of quantifiable results, if you can't specifically state with dollars, percents, and numbers, if there's no real results, it's a mistake. And the 5th one is that if you're missing some of their keywords, if you're missing keywords, if they can't see on the resume that what they're looking for is on your resume, then it's not a good fit. So those 5 key resume mistakes can really hold you back before you've even gotten a chance to use the resume to get the interview. It's important to understand that statistics say 40, sometimes even 50, depending on the research, of hiring managers spend less than a minute reviewing the resume. They're going to look at the headlines. They're going to look really quickly. They're going to scan it. And then they're going to dive in if what they've seen at the top looks good, or if they can see sections. This person's got the education I'm looking for. They have management experience. They have supervision experience. Whatever those first few bullet points have is what they're going to dive into. So the tricky thing is that you've now got a lot of information to sort through. And most importantly, I would write a draft. I would have a master resume, which might be 4 or 5 pages and has all of your history. And then you want to update it and you want to customize it to fit each job. So it's not quite as overwhelming as this, because you're going to keep a master, save as your name, and then the company name that you're sending that resume to. Especially if you're sending it as an email link, and you're attaching the resume, you want the attachment to say Liz Mohler, and then the company you're applying to, UCLA. And you save as that, and you go on the UCLA job description site and you check to make sure what job you're applying to is the one that matches the resume. So you're matching it up. And then I always coach my clients, find a buddy, find somebody else that's looking to change careers or upgrade their resume, and swap resumes with them. And practice interviewing off that resume, asking questions about what's on that resume, and do the stories that you want to tell. Do you have lead-ins on your resume so you can share those stories? because the resume is just a tool to get you in the door to the interview to help you land the job. So I feel like I'm talking really quickly, but I'm cognizant of time. And so I wanted to open it up to questions and see if there's deeper questions, because I know I've covered a lot.
Yes, so we have a lot of questions and we've got some time. So let's just jump right into the questions. And some of them will be related to the things you talked about, and some of them will be different. So this one is kind of related to something you've talked about. What do you recommend adding into experience if you've been working at the same place for 10 plus years?
Oh, that's a great question. So if you've been working at the same place for 10 years, I would hope that you've been promoted. So you come in as an associate director, and then you become a director, and then you become a vice president, and your job responsibilities change. And so to give yourself a little bit of help with that, you may need to go back and kind of remind yourself, well, what did I do when I first got hired? Was I just answering phones and filing and photocopying? And then as I progressed up, what job titles changed? And sometimes you need to be creative about your own titles. Maybe you worked at a really small company where you wore a lot of hats, and you might need to break it down into what those hats were. So it might not be an official job title that you were promoted, but it could be categories of the job. So if you worked at the same restaurant for 10 years and you were waiting tables, you were ordering supplies, you were opening and closing, those could be categories. And then within ordering supplies, you might, negotiated a revamp of the menu, or you may have helped with supply chain issues during COVID. Breaking it up and having some headlines is a great suggestion.
So the next question is about career pivots or career switches. We've got a number of people asking about career shifts, even referring to it with different terms, but meaning the same thing. Somebody who has been in a position for or in a specific field for quite a long time, and maybe had various experiences, been in a field and then now getting some new training, maybe have been at home for a while, maybe has been part-time. How does one sort of encompass a career pivot, and what does that look like specifically on a resume, since that's our topic for today?
That is a great topic for today, because I think that's another thing that's new in our world of work, is that people that were laid off to no fault of their own and their job just disappeared, hospitality and service and COVID, and now they're switching to something maybe that they did at home, like a home-based business. And so their resume, their work history is in their old occupation, but their passion and their hobby and where they want to go is forward. That may be a good time to use the functional resume, where you highlight at the top of the resume what your new skills are, your new experience and the challenges. And then at the very bottom, you could also make it a combination resume, where you would explain that, your previous 10 years was working in something else. So I would say a different type of resume would be a good one for that.
All right. And then for recent college grads, why would a GPA be necessary to include on a resume, or is it necessary? I don't know. I, for one, have never included my GPA on my resume.
I haven't either. And I always tell my clients, unless you've got a 3.5 and above, and unless you're looking for an academic position in an academic environment, or you're applying, your resume is for a job on a university campus, or your job is with the, I think some of the accountants that were working for like the private equity firms, and they were graduating from an Ivy League school, and they want to know where you are. Then you're, or if the job description says, you must graduate in the top 30 of your class. So if you made the honor roll, if you made the dean's list, highlight it. If that's one of your strengths, if that's something that sets you apart from the competition, highlight it. Anything less than a 3.5, anything more than 2 years old or a year old out of college, drop the GPA is my general rule of thumb.
I had a friend who was an accountant, and he was telling me back when we were just out of college that it's normal to put a GPA on an accountant's resume, but I'm not sure if that's still true, or if that was
That's
even
what
true
I
then.
heard.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Oleg. Years ago, when I was coaching at the business school, they needed to have their GPAs on there for some of these very high level accounting firms. They wanted numbers, dollars, percents. They wanted to know what this person had, what they had accomplished. And especially in this day and age, so many college students are not working while they go to school. So the curiosity is, well, what were your grades like? And it may come up in an interview, or it may come up, at some point, somebody's going to ask you, well, what courses did you take? So rather than putting your GPA, you might want to highlight the coursework that you took, especially if you have a communications degree. That's a pretty broad degree, or a liberal arts history, or whatever your degree was. You might want to put coursework in, or research projects included, especially if you don't have a
I'm
lot
glad
of
you brought
work.
up research projects, because
Yeah.
sometimes throughout the education, you do some really interesting projects and you can include those.
Especially if you did a project for a company. So maybe you did a design project for a commercial real estate, and you've got a portfolio. You might want to have on that resume, if it's a digital resume, maybe there's a link to your portfolio, or you put a note, in your cover letter that says portfolio available upon request, or coursework, detailed coursework, or transcripts. If you've got good grades and you want to offer it up, you could certainly put that in a cover letter.
Sure.
Yeah.
We had a comment in the chat. It says GPA is needed for engineering positions for recent graduates. So that's another field where the GPA is wanted.
Yeah, a lot of the STEM, the science, technology, engineering, math, they, on the resume is separate than the application. That's another thing I should point out to everybody, is that a resume is different than an application, because a resume is not a legally binding document. A resume is a story about who you are. There may be a supplemental application that asks you for numbers and percents and dollars, and they're going to want you to fill it in for them. Yeah.
So next question. I'm from Europe and have been working the same job since I arrived stateside 14 years ago. Should I still omit what I did before?
I always tell my clients, don't omit, don't take out things that add value to who you are. In other words, if you're, in your 50s and 30 years ago, you were an artist, and now you've worked for 25 years and you want to be an artist again, you certainly want to engage that conversation by putting something on the resume so that they ask you, tell me more. Tell them what you know how to do. So if you can tie that in that functional or combination resume, if you want to do it again. I also tell my clients, if there's things that, if you look through your resume and you look at bullet points and you go, oh, I don't ever want to do filing and photocopying, or I don't ever want to deal with such and such, don't put it on the resume. Because if it's on the resume, they're going to try to fit it together. So there's a decision to make.
So yeah, looking at your resume like a narrative or a story is really is important.
Yes. Yeah.
So the next question is, do you still need to put your home address and phone number on your resume? This person is concerned about hackers stealing that information.
Yes, I think that is a really tricky one. And in today's world, 2022, when you Google somebody, you can very quickly find out if they've got a Facebook account, if they've got a LinkedIn account, if there's a trail. So putting your address on the resume, I would say yes, if it's an added value. I'm coaching somebody here in Los Angeles, and they currently live in El Segundo, and they're trying to get a job in Marina del Rey, and it's close. If she was in El Segundo trying to get a job in Thousand Oaks or the Conejo Valley, I might tell her not to put her address on there, because we don't want her to get weeded out as being geographically undesirable. So if you're hand delivering a resume to someplace and you want to say to them, look, I'm 5 minutes away for this in-person job. I can work weekends, I can work evenings, I can be here in 5 minutes, I'm in the community. I used to say it's the 3 rules of real estate: location, location, location. Now in the digital age, with so many remote jobs, you may not need to give them more than an email and a phone number. Make sure your answering machine on your phone is appropriate. If you're interviewing
Your
for a job,
voicemail.
Your voicemail, your email, you might need a new email account if you've got some crazy email address. Yeah, clean up the voicemail, clean up the email, and then your choice. On the application, they're going to have to get your address eventually. But
yeah, you're putting that in there somewhere. in along the process. So I don't think that it's a deal breaker if you don't include your home address and phone number on the resume. Usually you can probably get away with just putting your email address.
Yep. And nowadays, some people are putting their websites. They're
Exactly.
putting their LinkedIn address.
Yeah, if you have a portfolio or something, you want to show something off,
Right. You put it right at the top. Your name and that information is one of the first things they're going to look at.
So we had a good comment in the chat about including transcripts and degrees and things. For some government jobs, the more supplemental documents that you include to authenticate your application, the more points you can be assigned to get to get a better score on your exam. I mean, because if the application itself is sort of like an exam, you're getting points there, so you might be getting ahead of somebody if you include information that's relevant.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why the exercise of writing the resume, you can actually start with some of those job applications, and you fill out the job applications. It's going to remind you of where you worked and who your boss was. And you might remember some of those important facts. And then you choose which of those facts from the application you put on the resume. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you talked about recruiters before, but I think to many people, the idea of recruiters is still sort of a black box. So how do recruiters work and how do you find one in your field?
That's a great question. So recruiters generally work on contingency or retainer. And so contingency means the recruiter gets paid if the person takes the job. Retainer means they could be an inside recruiter. So depending on what industry you're in, you may want to just start asking around other people in the industry, what recruiters do they use? And you could go directly to a company and ask the company, what recruiters do you use? Recruiters are generally at the higher level. I always say 100,000 plus is where the recruiter will get involved because they get a percentage. Sometimes they get a very high percentage. They can get up to 20, 30%. So sometimes it's a negative if an applicant goes in with a recruiter, then the company needs to pay that fee. So if the applicant already has a direct contact at the company and can get their resume into a decision maker, they may or may not want to use the recruiter. That being said, sometimes at the lower level, a temp agency or a placement agency might act as a recruiter. So I had a client who really wanted to work at Mattel Toys. She wanted to be a Barbie doll designer and she wanted to design the dresses. She wanted to get into Mattel and she called me up and she said, I can't get in. I apply online, I get rejected. It just doesn't work. And I said, well, who do you know working at Mattel? And she says, well, I do know someone who just retired because we met at a sewing class. We were both sewing and she worked at Mattel. She's retired. And I said, well, ask the person who retired from Mattel, who do they know that still works at Mattel? And who do they know that are maybe temporary jobs at Mattel? Someone goes on maternity leave or they have a short need for an event that they're putting on. What temp agency do they use? And who's the contact for that? And sure enough, my client who had been rejected with her, in the front door applications, called back 2 weeks later and said, oh, my friend who retired connected me with somebody who's got a temp agency. And I'm now going to go in and I'm going to answer phones. And once I get the job answering phones, I'm just going to show them some of my design work and they're going to get to know me and like me and trust me. But I wouldn't have gotten my foot in the door if I hadn't gone through that temp agency. And so now she's got the job at Mattel Toys, working her way up the ladder. So you just never know whether a recruiter is going to be helpful or not that helpful. And they're not career counselors. They're paid by the organization or the company to do the placement. So a lot of times people get frustrated because these recruiters aren't helping them. So that's an understanding of, are they being paid on contingency or are they being paid on retainer? Always be nice to recruiters is what I say. And you want as many recruiters as possible to know who you are. But recruiters, which used to be called headhunters, are more interested in stealing somebody from one company and putting them in another because the trust is already there. So someone who's unemployed or laid off or not working doesn't appear as valuable to a recruiter because there's something wrong. They're not working. And so they may get overlooked. It's a challenge.
So for dates on education, do you have a standard cutoff for when, after how many years you get your degree, that you should take it off? I mean, not the degree itself, but the year that you got it?
It's so hard to answer some of these questions because the big answer is going to be, it depends. I work with students who took 6 years to get through college. So I've coached them to maybe not put the year they started college, but maybe the year they got their diploma. And so it's just graduated 2022. If they're recent grads and they want to put graduated May of 2022 because it's only September, or anticipated graduation. Maybe they're smart and they're college students and they're planning ahead and they know they're going to graduate in December, or they know they're going to graduate next year. I have some people that I'm coaching now that are looking for jobs a year ahead because of the academic program that they're on. The thing about academics is it sort of depends on, do they want a recent grad? There's a lot of value in sending a resume to a fellow alumni who went to the same college or university. So using the college university network, they may not care that it was 20 years ago that you graduated. So you may want to put that on the resume. Somebody else might look at that and ageism would be alerted. So it depends is the honest answer on that one.
It's interesting when somebody is well into their career and maybe got a degree 40 years ago. In that kind of situation, would you include the date that they graduated?
If it was 40 years ago, I would be inclined to sort of leave it off. I went for 2 years of undergrad at Colorado State University, 2 years of undergrad at Madison, Wisconsin, got my degree, and then went to Arizona. I dropped Colorado because I don't have space on my resume. I've done so many other interesting, cool things that have risen to the top that my degree is from Madison, Wisconsin. I don't add any coursework. It was 30 years ago. It's a little bit out of date. In fact, it's so out of date that I actually said to myself, well, it's been a long time since I've learned career coaching practices. Where do I go to sharpen the saw? Where do I go to learn best practices? What's the governing body? What association can I join where I can be with my experts? And I used to be with the California Association of Counseling and Development. And when I worked with Jewish Vocational Services and when I worked for the California Worksource Center, I went to those conferences. Then I started presenting at those conferences. Then those conferences disbanded or they stopped happening or COVID happened. So I had to go online and say, well, where are coaches? Where are executive coaches? And that's why I joined the International Coach Federation and paid the money to take a new course to get a certificate and to learn what's new in that industry. So if your education was 40 years ago, you may want to ask yourself, where can I learn more today? And it might just be a LinkedIn learning. I know the library has wonderful resources to go online and get a certificate in whatever that new thing is. I would bump that to the top of the resume and put the education at the bottom.
I'll include a link. We had a whole program about learning with the library. And that includes free access to LinkedIn and many other things. So next question is about keywords. Now, I think you had a slide with some keywords in it, but this person is curious about how do you find the keywords for different professions? What's important to include when you're making a career switch or if you're just applying for a certain position?
That's a great question. And I think one of the best places to find the keywords is on the job descriptions. So if you can find a job description, even if it's not for the company you want to apply to, maybe it's for a different company. It could be a company in another state, but there's the job description that's similar to what you're interested in. I would go through those job descriptions and pull out keywords. The other thing you can do is you can Google and you can look for sample resumes for nursing or sample resumes for lawyers or sample resumes. And you can look at some sample resumes and get some keywords from those as well. Sometimes I tell my clients, who else do you know that's doing the kind of work you do? And maybe they'll share their resume, because if their resume worked and they got the job, then maybe you can model your resume to be similar to theirs. And I've seen that work for different clients because they're like, oh, my friend just got a job there. Well, what did your friend's resume have on it? Did they have the same education? You met them in school? How did they highlight it? Because they're looking for that fit.
All right. So
I love these questions. These are good questions.
we've got a lot of questions. I'm afraid to say this, but we're not going to be able to cover them all just because we currently have a backlog of 58 questions,
Oh my gosh.
which
Well,
is
I do have a couple workshops coming up. And I know,
mhm.
Oleg, not only do you have workshops coming up, but you've
Oh
got a
yeah.
lot of them on your YouTube. So
Yes.
let me share. There's a couple things that I'm doing. One of them is coming up on September 23rd, and it's called Street Wisdom. And Street Wisdom is an organization I've been volunteering with. They're actually out of London, England. And so they are doing a worldwide wander for creative people solving big worldwide problems. But I think everybody in the world needs to be creative to solve a problem, and anybody can benefit from this event. It's a 24-hour event because it's around the globe. And the website is something that Oleg's going to send out to everybody, but it's basically www.theworldwidewander. My program is going to be at 10 a.m. and my portion is at 10:30. So if you register for my portion, it's a virtual Zoom interaction where you get to think about what is it that I want to do next, and where am I going to take my career and my path. And then we have an activity that I will be walking people through to help them answer that question. There's another program coming up on the 27th, which is decision-making and values-based decision-making that I'm doing for a job hunting group out of Baltimore. And these are both free, open to the public. And in that Baltimore job hunting decision-making, I'm going to walk through a little bit of the road to job search success. And then how do you make decisions about where you should focus your time and energy? So I hope that those will be helpful. And then, Oleg, I know you've got lots of stuff, and I always tell people, reach out to me because this is my contact information. The best way to reach me on LinkedIn is to put a personal note. Anytime I'm coaching anybody to make connections and build their network, I always encourage you to write a note, like, great seeing you at the library program on resumes. Please connect with me and put that in the LinkedIn. You can look at my website. You can email me directly if you've got questions. I'm here for you. And Oleg, I know you've got lots of other stuff that you
Oh
can
yeah,
promote as
we have
well.
we
So
have a lot
maybe
of stuff coming up. So I'll just really quickly mention one more, and then we'll get to more questions. Liz, you're okay for about 15 more minutes of questions?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay. I think we'll try to we'll try to cover some of them.
Yeah, and we started a couple minutes late. So I like
Yeah.
the fact that we let people come in the room, and then those that want to stick around for 10 or 15 minutes, we can go to the bottom of the hour.
Yeah, and so what I wanted to say is that there are a lot of people have asked questions about career pivots, and we actually have a program specifically covering that. We have a program on September 20th at 11 o'clock. It's a Tuesday at 11 o'clock called Creativity in Career Pivots. And so what that program is going to be is it's going to expand the way people look at changing careers. It's going to use the research in the field of creativity to address some of the fears, some of the challenges that people face when they're changing careers, which is a huge a huge turn for many people. So that's on September 20th, and I'll also post a link to that in the follow-up. A lot of stuff is going in the follow-up email. I just don't want to overwhelm people by posting things in all these links in the chat, because first of all, it's hard to copy things out of the chat on Zoom. And we're covering a lot of things now, so getting people to go every which way is probably not the best policy. But now let's get to some of these questions. I'm looking for employment and wondering how to navigate my search results. I'm looking for a remote job. I have registered with most of the websites you mentioned. However, I'm getting hit with a lot of jobs that are not applicable. Also, I'm notified of the same open positions repeatedly. So how do you sort of teach these websites to work for you?
Oh my gosh, that's one of those applicant tracking system questions. And I would say that is the negative about applying for things online, is that you're going to be out there in the internet, and then those bots are going to find your application and they're going to send it out sort of unbeknownst to you for other leads. And I've had a lot of clients get very frustrated because they don't want to do multi-level marketing. They don't want to do 100% commission sales. So you do need to sort of ask yourself, am I focusing? Or am I doing what we call the Lizism of spray and pray? because if you're just sending things out, you're going to just get a bunch of stuff back in. It's kind of like the analogy of if you want to go fishing and you can cast a really wide net, but you may get a rusty can and an old boot and a lot of stuff you don't want in that wide net, and it can be overwhelming because you're getting stuff you just don't want. Whereas if you flip it and you say to yourself, okay, where are the companies I want to work for? Or maybe you have to start with industry. What's the industry I want to work for? Within that industry, where are the companies? And then if it's remote, the world is too big. You can't work remotely. Is it an American company, or do you have a bilingual skill set? Are you a technical person? So the curiosity would be, what industry, what companies, what job, what role, what responsibility, and really niche it. And then you may need to target who are those decision makers and start a bit of a personal campaign of, hey, John Smith at such and such a company, I think I can help you remotely with this, 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 and this. And you create a custom application and you send it in, or a custom resume, and you send it in that way.
Right. I also have sort of an information science, information retrieval technical perspective on that. So for a lot of these sites, you can really limit your search quite a lot. You can do some creative search techniques and then have use those searches that you've kind of crafted to be, like you said, really specific, and have only those send you notifications. Those specifics, because if you're getting too much, if you're getting things that are irrelevant, it might be that companies are just bad actors and they're just flooding people, they're spamming people pretty much. But it also could be that your search string is too wide, so you need to get more specific in the search string. And if you're getting too many notifications, all these websites have in the settings fields a place to limit notifications, so you might get one digest a day instead of each individual one, or have it just turn off some websites that keep giving you irrelevant information, and just go visit those websites and search manually for those.
Yep, that's exactly right, because the technology can be beneficial, but it can be also overwhelming. And so you definitely want to put barriers on that. And you might want to stop getting alerts, because they can interrupt your day every time LinkedIn is sending you something. So be careful about that.
Sometimes some of those job websites, they get a lot of jobs coming in at a very rapid clip. And some of them are, the popular websites sometimes have the same jobs. So you're just going to get the same stuff.
Right. Good point, Oleg.
So where on Facebook is there job postings on Facebook? I think you mentioned Facebook as one of the sites before.
I do think that I'm not sure if it's called Facebook Jobs, but I do know that if you're on Facebook and you have an audience of family members, those family members may not know what you do. And so if you put on Facebook, I'm looking for not a job. We don't want to say, I'm looking for a job, I'm unemployed. We do not want to write that. What we want to do is we want to say, I'm looking for advice. I sort of think I might want a job at TRW or Raytheon or an engineering position, and reaching out to my family and friends. Does anybody have any advice? Does anybody have any information about these opportunities? So you go on Facebook because you're like, hey, does anybody want to take a look at my resume and maybe do a mock interview, or maybe talk to me about these opportunities? So it's not like I would say to people, oh, post your resume on Facebook. That's like a passive job search. Let me just put it out there online and someone will call me. That's not how the world works. It's kind of like dating. You don't want to just put it all out there and hope for the best. You want to be a little bit specific, a little bit focused. It's like make some specific requests to your family and friends and see what opportunities might come up. So that's how I would use Facebook.
It's not a traditional job site. It's more like your network.
It's your network. And that's really what we want to focus on. We want people to know what you do. So you may want to put on Facebook a post that says, hey, I just completed this certification program, or I just read this great book on this topic, or I just found out about this great company that's doing these great things, and I'm thinking of exploring working there, and get a conversation going on Facebook or LinkedIn or social media that's within what you want to do. Because you never know who's going to read that and may circle back. I like telling the story about coaching somebody whose grandparents were retired in a retirement community in Arizona. And there they were in Arizona, and my client was in Michigan. And they were like, well, why would I tell my grandparents in Arizona that I'm graduating from college and looking for a job? Like, who do they know? And I'm like, well, just let them know. You're going to send out a graduation announcement. Let them know what kind of work you're looking for, 2 or 3, maybe 5 top companies you'd like to work at. And sure enough, the grandparents in Arizona are out golfing or playing tennis. And they mention what their grandson is doing, who just graduated from the University of Michigan. And one of the dads on the golf course says, oh, my daughter just started a company like that. Maybe your grandson might like to work for my daughter. She's hiring. She needs good, smart people. I know you. I like you. I trust you. Let's hook your grandson up with my daughter and they'll get a job from Florida, Michigan. You never know who's reading or
Not
seeing
bad. That's
who
an
you
interesting
are.
connection.
Yeah.
So we had a few questions about references, and I'm going to put a few together and maybe we can get them sort of in the buckshot approach. So we've got, do you still put references available on request on a resume? It's question number 1. Number 2, how many references do you put?
Those are, yep.
Let's do those and let's just talk about the
Yeah.
references.
Yeah, and it's nice of you to pull all that together, because the new rules of resumes is you do not put references available upon request. That's redundant. That's like a menu at a restaurant saying to-go box is available. We kind of know that from eating at a restaurant. We know that if we follow up with this person, they're going to have references. I always tell my clients, start writing your reference list as you're going through your own experiences, and have it as a separate document, and be as specific as you can. Not just the person's name, not just their phone number, but maybe a cell phone number and an office number in case they're not answering an office phone, an email. Make sure you check in with your references, get their permission to use you as a reference, and then
Very
maybe even
important.
add a sentence. Yeah, this was my supervisor for 5 years when I worked at such and such. This was my coworker when I worked at such and such. This was my professor at this course at this university. This is my coworker from or colleague from, whatever the story connection is. And I would say try to have a reference list of about 10 people, and know that those 10 people are a variety of people in your life, and then cut and paste which of those references are going to be the best references for the job you're going for. If it's an academic position, you may want to use those professor references. If it's a part-time summer job, you might want to use your friends. So you want to have a lot of references. The other nice thing about reaching out and getting permission to use people as a reference is take that time to ask them, what do you think are some of my strengths? What do you think are some of the things I do well? And then take notes, so that if somebody says you're so creative and you think outside the box and you always come up with new ideas, and that reference knows you because you're creative and you think outside the box, and they've seen that fun side of you. And then another reference says you're so meticulous, you're so organized, you have a great attention to detail, because they know you from a different work environment. Which of those references do you think you're going to serve up for a job that requires creativity and think outside the box? The one who says you're creative, versus the one, if you're applying for a job and that's meticulous and orderly and it's going to be just filing and photocopying, you may want to use the one that says this person's really good at doing, things that they're told how to do. So knowing what your references are saying about you is as simple as asking them.
Right. And then here's another one about cybersecurity. How does one avoid identity theft when posting resumes broadly?
Oh, Oleg, I don't know. You're a little more techie than I am. How do I?
Well, here's the thing. When you post, your resume doesn't typically include personally identifiable information. You don't have to include your address and your phone number and your email, and even that stuff. I would say an address and a phone number, especially an address, that stuff, for anybody who's really savvy, that stuff is not hard to find on most people. You can usually pay $1, if not for free, you can pay $1.99 to websites, to listing websites, or 99 cents or whatever, and get somebody's address. You can often even get their age. It's not really that difficult. But I would say if you're worried about your privacy, just include your email address on your resume. The other stuff on your resume, like the places you've worked, is not that private. And many people just post their resumes on their website. I mean, pretty much everybody on LinkedIn posts their work history, and that's just available to people who want to see it. So it's not something that's necessarily something to be afraid of. That said, I mean, I suppose the way to avoid any theft, if you're really privacy conscious, if there's something in your history that makes it so that that you don't want people to know your work history, just like the general public to know your work history, or even your name or your email address, I would say the best way then is to apply directly to the company. So don't use Indeed.com, don't use LinkedIn, don't use any of those intermediaries. Go to the website of the company and send your resume in there, because most websites will, at least most large company websites will have a career or opportunity section, and they'll have their own input, like intake form. So I would say just go directly there. It's more work. I mean, the nice thing about Indeed and LinkedIn is they make applying for jobs as easy as clicking a button, but that's the trade-off. You know, if you want to keep your information more contained and private, then you have to go through that tension. I mean, the friction.
Yep. And I think that's so well said, Oleg. And I love the conversation style of these the programs that we get to do, because these are great questions. When I work with lawyers, I work a lot with lawyers, and I work a lot with people in the entertainment industry, actors, directors, producers. They don't want their information out there. They don't have LinkedIn accounts because they don't want to be flooded with information. So it is definitely we're in a very transparent world. And what I would say is be savvy about where you're, like Oleg said, go directly to the company's site and make sure it's secure. But also know that you now can do the reverse, and you can start to research companies and dig in. And the World Wide Web, you can look at their financials, you can look at if they're a publicly traded company, you can find out who the executives are. You could potentially Google to see who your boss is going to be. You could look up your boss and get their information. Where do they live? How many years experience do they have? And you can do the reverse. And finding work does take some work. And the easy thing would be to say, oh, I sent out 100 resumes, but that doesn't give you the results. It's this focus, and joining workshops like this and taking away little nuggets and saying, oh, what can I do differently? Because I've been doing it this way. It's not working. Well, let me try it this way. And it might be a little hard and uncomfortable at first to admit that you don't know what you're doing on the resume, or to admit to a family member that you're exploring options and you're trying to pivot. But we've all had to pivot during COVID. We've all had to figure things out. So pat yourself on the back and say, you know what, maybe I can do this. And know that the job search process is a series of no, 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 no. But every no gets you one closer to the yes that's coming in. So I don't know if that segued too far off the question.
Oh, I think that's okay. So let me get maybe like do two more questions, and then because we're pretty much at time.
Okay.
So let me see if I can grab one from up here. So this is a really interesting question. So this person says that they've read a lot that name bias is an issue in resume determinations. I was wondering if, as an experiment, assuming this is true, should I put Chris, say, instead of Crystal? Since Chris is a nickname I often go by, and it's more masculine or gender neutral.
Ooh, well, that's lucky for that person to be able to go Chris, and eventually you have to show up. So the purpose of the resume is to get the interview, and when you show up at the interview, what are they going to say? Are they going to say, oh, we really wanted a cute blonde girl, I guess in Hollywood, that, maybe that's the casting and what they're trying to do. It's illegal for a company to gender bias. So I don't know if that change on your resume would be enough to get you through the ATS, or I don't know. I'm sort of hesitant to say that that's what's keeping you from getting a job. It's the male, female, but I don't know what industry you're in. I mean, I just coached a a recent college grad who's a marine biologist, and she's going to be the only female on a boat in Alaska with 25 guys. And she did have to beat out a lot of men and a lot of guys in her class because she's a female. And they were like, we're not sure we want to put a female marine biologist on a boat for 30 days off the shore of Alaska taking fish samples. But she said, I'm qualified and I can do anything a guy can do. I can lift the 50 pounds. She had to do a lot of things to prove that she could. So you got to prove you can do what you want to do.
It's an interesting question because, I mean, a lot of names could be changed to be more gender neutral sounding or not. I don't know. My name is Oleg Kagan. So Oleg is not a very popular. I can't shorten that name or make it any different. I mean, if you know, Oleg is a Russian name. I'm from the former Soviet Union. So I can't change my name. So what I would say is that it's an interesting question because for this person, they actually go by a different, they just go by a shortened version. So it's something that they're not being dishonest. They actually do that. That's actually something that they're called. But so in that situation, I would think, yeah, why not? Yeah, put that on your resume. If it's a name you actually go by, when you have to fill out an application, you may have to put your government name. So you may have to put your full name at some point anyway. But if you want to put that on your resume and it's something you actually go by, like if it was me and I wouldn't recommend saying if I'm applying for a job to put my name as like Tom Kagan. My name is not Tom. I don't go by Tom. And so that would be just being dishonest.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I'm a huge fan of honesty and trust. And those, nobody's going to hire you if they don't know you. And they're not going to hire you if they don't like you. But that foundation is trust. So the resume, they want to trust that what they see on the resume is what they're going to get. So making sure that you're being honest and truthful to yourself is going to carry you further out.
Right. So let me do one more.
I can't believe there's over 180 people on this call.
There were like 200
end.
or like 200 and something, 220 or 240 earlier. But yeah, it's a good topic. And the number of questions, it speaks, maybe we have to do another career coach ask me anything.
Ask a career coach was one of our better programs.
Yeah, we've had that one
ask
before.
A career coach. That was a good one.
So let me see if I can. Okay, so there's been a lot of LinkedIn questions.
Yeah.
So let's close up with, and we've done a LinkedIn program before, so I will post that in the follow-up email. So those interested in LinkedIn, you'll get something more than this. But the question is LinkedIn necessary to get a job these days? Also, should your LinkedIn profile match your resume?
Those are two great questions. And no, LinkedIn is not necessary. My lawyers don't have it. My entertainment clients don't have it. The guy that does my yard, they don't, people in the service industry, I can't find them on LinkedIn. They don't need LinkedIn. So, the question is, do you need LinkedIn? Is that where the people that are going to hire you are going to find you? Because if they're not looking on LinkedIn, if you're the boss that you're trying to interview with isn't on LinkedIn, he's probably not going to find you on LinkedIn. So not a necessity. In other industries and other occupations, yeah, they want to know that you're alive and you are who you say you are, and your LinkedIn does match your resume. But in actuality, you might have a very professional LinkedIn, and then you might have a side hustle. And that resume may be for somebody to hire you for your side hustle. My son, Nate Muller, is an artist. So he does large scale public art installations. He also does New York Fashion Week. He also does concert visuals. He also does, websites on the side and NFT digital art for Ethereum and cryptocurrency. That's not all on his resume. It's not all on his world is what I call a patchwork quilt career, where he's doing a lot of different things. So your resumes and your LinkedIns don't have to match your website. It's nice if there's a thread of continuity. You are one person, but do you have these different activities and these different skills and these different strengths? And it's not uncommon in 2022 to have another part-time job or two part-time jobs.
All right.
Yeah.
The fact that everybody here is interesting is a really great point to end on.
Right.
Liz, thank you very much for reprising this program and for helping us relaunch Work Ready. I knew that when I spoke to you again about doing this program, that it would be good and interesting, and I think it has been. So once again, thank you very much. And thank you for everybody out there for sticking with us. If you're interested in more virtual events from LA County Library, go to our website, lacountylibrary.org. On the right-hand side, click that events button, and there's a lot more where this came from. See you hopefully next week at Dare to Get a Job, and good afternoon.
Thank you, Oleg. All right. Bye-bye.